Welcome into Flag for Discussion, episode 56 for Monday, December 29th. My name is Farbod Markazi. Jace is on his way back from his holiday celebration, his holiday trip. So another solo show for me today, but we're going to have a lot of fun doing it. We got a lot to talk about. I hope everybody had a wonderful holiday and Christmas celebration if you celebrate, or just holiday season. We're coming up just around the corner. New Year's Day, New Year's Eve is just around the corner. A lot of stuff to talk about. I mean, I think people who, maybe if you're an NFL fan or a NBA fan, which I am, there's games to talk about on Christmas or around Christmas. But if you are a college football fan, chaos is still everywhere. And there's still coaching hires, transfer portals just getting heated up. Something there were a couple of things I was thinking about during Christmas when I was with family. It was, one, bowl games are still awesome, but there's just a lot of bowls out there complain about how bowl season's not the same anymore, about how these games aren't important anymore. And while that might be true because we're trying to fit a bowl season alongside a playoff structure, like two things that just don't fit. You're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole. With that said, there's Pop-Tart Bowl really shows you that if you just market your bowl right, if you just prove to America that like you're interesting, you're funny, you are gimmicky in a good way, and you can put on a good product for the fans, for the team, and everyone involved is just happy to be there, then people are going to tune in. The Pop-Tart Bowl at BYU Georgia Tech, obviously the game itself was awesome. I thought Haynes King was about to lead a magical last-second, typical Haynes King drive to win the game with that final in that final drive, but BYU ends up holding out. And I mean, try to explain this to someone not from America. Obviously, trying to explain anything college football to someone not from America is hard as it is, because how quirky everything is, how messed up the structure of the leadership at the top of the sport is. But if you try to explain to like someone in Europe, yeah, so one of our postseason games, it doesn't lead, the winner doesn't go on to like a championship or the next round of the playoffs, but one of our postseason games, it's sponsored by Pop-Tarts. And there's like several live mascots dressed in Pop-Tarts, the different Pop-Tarts, and the winning team gets to choose which of them they want to sacrifice. So there's a giant toaster on the field, and those Pop-Tarts go on top of the toaster, and the winning team pushes down the lever, and out comes a perfectly edible, ready-to-eat Pop-Tart. And I think there was another podcaster back, I don't know, a couple of years ago who reached out to Pop-Tart trying to ask, like, hey, can I have that mascot costume just for shits and giggles? And Pop-Tart legitimately said, no, that we sacrificed him. That was the last that Pop-Tart ever existed. That costume's gone. It was eaten. And so they're fully committed to the bit. So that imagine explaining that to somebody that's not a college football fan, or let alone somebody that's just like in Australia, someone in England who's who doesn't really know what college football is or the traditions and the fun, quirky stuff around it. I think that alone is one of the most fun parts of college football. And I don't know, I was just randomly thinking about just bowl games in general. We saw Penn State beat Clemson. Penn State, by the way, at the beginning of the year, Penn State and Clemson were 1-2. And I think if you told us, I don't know, back in August that they would be facing off in a bowl game, we probably would have been telling you, yeah, it's probably like the Peach Bowl, maybe the Rose Bowl. Maybe they're playing to move on to the national title game. But they played in the Pinstripe Bowl. Penn State won 22-10. A lot of changes needed at Clemson. Some changes already underway at Penn State. Good for both of them to get the win. Houston beat LSU on Saturday night. That was a fun back and forth game, 38-35 final. We're going to talk about Kyle Whittingham. Don't worry. I know we're 5 minutes in. I don't want some aspects of the sport to not be covered. And bowl games are still fun for college football fans, at least for college football geeks like me and Jace. So I hope if you've tuned into the Flag for Discussion Bowl Mania Challenge, that you're doing well in your brackets and in your picks. Make sure you're following us on YouTube at Flag for Discussion, spelled out. Make sure you're subscribed to us on Apple Podcast, Spotify, wherever you get your podcast at Flag for Discussion, spelled out. We're also on Twitter at F4 Discussion and on TikTok at Flag 4 Discussion. All right. Michigan hires Kyle Whittingham to be their next head coach. And like I said off the top, I think there's a number of different ways to go around this. This is a 5-year deal, $41 million. Basically, the essential opportunity for them to stabilize the program, to finally to bring in a coach that everyone has good things to say about him. And maybe if you think it's a bridge, that at least the next time you go hire a coach, it's not going to be under scandal or your coach leaving for the NFL amidst scandal, which is the last two coaches that have left. So off the top, I love the hire, but I've seen a lot of people kind of, I think bashing is the wrong word. I've seen some Michigan fans disappoint. I've seen some rival of Michigan fans saying, like, just having some fun at Michigan's expense for the hire, which I just don't get. Kyle Whittingham has been the head coach at Utah since like 2005. He took over for Urban Meyer. Guys, there's a documentary that's been out for several years about where Urban Meyer went next after Utah. And then Urban Meyer had another chapter at Ohio State. Oh, and then Urban Meyer had another chapter with the Jaguars. A brief chapter, but a chapter. Kyle Whittingham's been a head football coach in the NCAA for a very long time. And that's not just because the guy, you don't coach that long without knowing how to adapt to the sport. And I know the biggest changes in college football have come by in the last 5 or so years, and a lot of coaches, we keep saying, are apt to retire or apt to maybe look for NFL opportunities because they don't like the direction or the trajectory of the sport. With that said, there were plenty of changes from 2005 until 2020 in college football, and you're not a head coach in the NCAA in college football without knowing how to adapt, knowing how to change, knowing how to adjust to the current landscape, whatever that may be. If I told you before Michigan announced their hire, before Michigan fired Sharon Moore, and before we knew anything about Kenny Dillingham, Kalen, DeBoer, whatever it is, if I told you that Michigan went out and hired a coach that had a 177-88 record, in bowl games he's 11-6. He has 23 ranked wins over top 25 opponents, 7 ranked wins over top 10 opponents. He led Utah to 18 winning seasons in 21 years, 8 10-win seasons. He has 3 conference titles. He's been a national coach of the year 3 different times. He's been a conference coach of the year 3 different times. He's been to a near Six Bowl or a big-time bowl game 4 times. He's 2-2 in those games, often having a far worse roster. He's had 35 All-Americans, over 60 NFL draft picks. Like, he's his current team's all-time winning coach. He's been the second longest tenured head coach in all of college football for active. So if I told you all of those stats without telling you who he is, you'd be like, damn, Michigan pulled a home run. And there's people out there saying, this is just a bridge coach. Michigan failed on option A, option B, option C, so they had to settle for option D. One thing is when Michigan fired Sharon Moore, Kyle Whittingham wasn't an option. Kyle Whittingham was still the head coach of Utah. And I think I have plenty to talk about the Utah side of this, but as Kyle Whittingham himself put it, he wasn't in the transfer portal at that time. And Utah, whatever happened there happened. He became available. Michigan will never tell us who they went out and looked at, but at least what's been reported is they were trying to talk to Kalen DeBoer. They were trying to talk to Kenny Dillingham. They were trying to talk to Jeff Brom. What's been reported since, though, is that Kalen DeBoer, obviously, we saw him say he's very happy at Alabama. He came out with a release committing to the future at Alabama, committing to Greg Byrne, no matter what happens in the playoff. I know that was a big conversation about, is Kalen DeBoer heading to Michigan if he lost to Oklahoma last week. Then there was the Kenny Dillingham thing. It's been reported now, and Kenny Dillingham himself said it, that he never received an offer from Michigan. He never talked to Michigan. Jeff Brom, it's been reported that he never received an offer from Michigan. So the only coach that we know that's gotten an offer from Michigan is Kyle Whittingham. Look, maybe they went and swung for the fences. Maybe they tried to get Nick Saban to come out of but none of that. Obviously, that didn't happen. But I would assume they probably had really high level candidates on their list. But the one that we can report and talk about that's received the offer was Kyle Whittingham. So doing a full autopsy on Michigan itself before we get into more Kyle Whittingham. Michigan is one of the true blue blood programs that's just had a tumultuous last 10 or so years. The Harbaugh era obviously promised stability. It promised an adult in the room. It promised a coach who's uber addicted to coaching football, winning games, and finding any way to win the game. The Harbaugh era also included an offensive coordinator that was arrested for an offensive assistant that was arrested for pretty disgusting acts and hacking into computers, trying to get personal information and images of student athletes. The Harbaugh era included a couple different smaller scandals of like Harbaugh paying for a cheeseburger. Like that stuff's stupid. This is 2025 now, or almost 2026. I feel like buying a cheeseburger or coffee for a college kid is acceptable, but that was also under the NCAA rules, which we don't need to get into right now. Harbaugh era also included the cheating scandal and Connor Stallions, and I think it's been reported that over like 7 and then Sherrone Moore. And we know what's happened to him in the last 2 weeks. But Sherrone Moore was the guy who stepped in as interim when Harbaugh was suspended for the cheeseburger gate, and he won a couple games. I would argue that I could have stepped in those with that team that Harbaugh built and would won a couple games too. Maybe not against Ohio State, but the early ones. And then Sherrone Moore stepped in and was the interim for the Ohio State game and some of the bigger games when Harbaugh was further suspended by the NCAA. And do you remember? I mean, when the team had taken off, flown to play Penn State, and Harbaugh was told on the plane basically that you're suspended, you can't coach this game, was dead set on leading that team, or so it appeared at least. When Harbaugh left for the NFL, obviously, I think two things can be true. I think he probably had sights on coaching in the NFL, especially after he led Michigan to a national title win, which happened. But I also think the second thing can be true, that he wanted to leave town before NCAA got more damning evidence or whatever on that cheating stuff that would end up hurting him and his legacy at Michigan. I understand that it always exists and people today will talk about it, but maybe you disagree with me. I fully believe that if history is written by the victors, and to the victors go the spoils. Those are two very generic sayings, but I fully believe that if Harbaugh had stayed at Michigan and the NCAA was then able to come down with more of a hammer. We already reacted to this months ago about what the punishment that Michigan actually got. But if Harbaugh was there, you assume that the punishment might have been a little bit harsher. I don't know what would have happened to him. I don't know if they would have been forced to fire him. I don't know if he would have just stepped down. But his legacy there, especially being a former student athlete and a national title winning coach, would have been tarnished a little bit. But to the victors go the spoils, maybe not to you right now, but in 30 years, 20 years, when people are just looking at the college football record books, Michigan won the national title under Jim Harbaugh. They're not going to see all the scandals if you're just going down the football reference page of looking at like the national titles in history or best college coaches in history, blah, blah, national title winning head coaches in history. When that happened, Harbaugh left to the NFL, and he left at a pretty inopportune time. The transfer portal, I think, was already open and closed. And when coaches leave, the transfer portal only opens up for your team for 30 days. So at that point, Michigan wasn't able to go get new kids who hopped in the portal, but their kids could jump and leave. They hire Sherrone Moore to be their head coach to stabilize the program, or so they thought, and be the bridge because it was an inopportune time. It wasn't the best time to go find the best candidate head coach. But they thought, if we hire Sharon, the kids love him. We're going to be able to stabilize the program. We're going to be able to keep kids from hopping in the portal and have a fighting chance for next year. And then we saw what happened in Sharon Moore's first year. They couldn't throw the forward pass because they poorly calculated the quarterback ability that they had there. And then, obviously, what's gone on since. They paid Bryce Underwood a ton of money to come to Michigan. The defense had a ton of draft picks that were holdovers from the Harbaugh era that left. And Michigan looked a bit like a shell of itself this past year. They looked fine. They looked competitive. But it wasn't anything special. And it kind of proved to me and proved to probably everyone else that Sharon Moore was a bridge hire. I don't think Sharon Moore was in Michigan's plans and to be their long-term head coach, to be one of those, call them statue guys, like the guys that you foresee if everything goes right, if you as an athletic department keeps supporting him in the way you should, that he down the road would be like a field name after Sharon Moore kind of guy, or a statue built for the guy. He wasn't a statue guy from Michigan. He was the best option in the January window when they had to hire a head coach. But then things got off the rails a little bit. Obviously, Sharon got fired for the inappropriate relationship. He got arrested for his actions after the firing, and I have no idea what he's doing now, but the bridge hire ended up also happening at a pretty poor time. And I'm kind of convinced at this point that Michigan probably wanted to fire him earlier and knew that if they had tangible, credible evidence to fire him after the Ohio State loss this year, that they would have, but they didn't have that evidence. We know that the lady in question who had the inappropriate relationship with Sharon provided the tangible evidence on the day of his firing. So that's how they were able to fire him for cause for that relationship. So long autopsy short, Sharon Moore now gets fired. Michigan is once again hiring a head coach at an inopportune time. A little bit more opportune than when Harbaugh up and left for the NFL, but still not the best time. And we knew about the Kalen DeBoer stuff. We knew about the Kenny Dillingham stuff. But as I mentioned earlier, we also know that those guys didn't necessarily get a job offer to be the Michigan head coach. And the transfer portal opens January 2nd, this coming week. Michigan needed a head coach before the transfer portal opens. So whether it's to keep their current players on the staff, the roster, or just to be able to go out and replenish the roster with the next coach's vision. So that is the little autopsy in general. Michigan itself, though, is a incredible opportunity for any head coach. I think there were some murmurs in the last week that is Michigan finding out that they're not as big a brand as they are, or as they're not as attractive a job as they are. And I know Michigan hasn't been, they had a spurt over the last 6 years of being uber successful. But then 15 years before that, they were pretty down, up and down for a little while. So I know Michigan hasn't been like the most consistently talented superpower in the Big Ten or nationally over the last 15, 20 years. But that Block M means something. Being a Michigan Wolverine means something. Being able to, look, the resources present at Michigan right now, with Larry Ellison and their NIL board and their collective, the fact that like some players, coaches would take a discount to play or coach for Michigan, all of that exists. Sharon Moore had 2 top 10, top 11 recruiting classes in the 2 years, and we've seen just recently an article came out just mentioning the dysfunction that was the Sharon Moore era at Michigan. That Sharon Moore wasn't talking to Wink Martindale. He had frequent blow-ups, and this isn't just about like on-field coaching or the scandals. This guy, it genuinely seems dysfunctional in that program. So the opportunity to upgrade for Michigan was at an all-time high as it is. And now we look at who they got. Kyle Whittingham. I think if you took a poll around the nation of who is the most respected, which head coach do you respect the most? Whose team plays harder for them than that you expect? Who gets the most out of less? If Kyle Whittingham's not number one amongst the nationwide poll, he's number two at least. Kyle Whittingham has led Utah. I spurted off the stats, but I think people don't understand. He has led Utah through 3 conferences, started in the Mountain West, became a Pac-12 school, built that school up to become the class of the Pac-12. He won a conference when Mario Cristobal was the head coach at Oregon. He won the conference when Lincoln Riley and Dan Lanning were head coaches in the Pac-12. So he built that program from a top-tier Mountain West team to struggling early in the Pac-12 to bringing in even better players, building up an identity and a culture to put on a good product at Rice Eccles, and made them amongst the top 2 or 3 teams in the Pac-12 year in, year out. He had a ton of 10-win seasons. He had everything you could want from your head coach. And then he also, by doing all that, he made them attractive enough to survive the Pac-12 exodus and join another Power 4 conference. It's not the Big Ten, it's not the SEC, it's the Big 12. It's still a Power 4 conference, and Utah very well could have been left out. Look, I understand Utah is a much more central location in the United States than Pullman, Washington, or Corvallis, Oregon. But when Utah entered the Pac in the early 10s, and if you just told a Pac-12 person, hey, in about 12 years, 13 years, 80, 90% of your conference is going to leave for other conferences, but the ones that are historically the worst programs, or at least in lower rated opportunities, they're going to get left behind. You probably would have included Utah in that list because they were a former Mountain West school. But now you're looking at it, Utah was attractive enough to join the Big 12. Oregon State and Washington State were left behind. So Kyle Whittingham, I have to start talking about Kyle Whittingham there, because I don't think people realize how impressive making your team attractive enough to go from a Group of 5 conference to a Power 5 conference, and then surviving another exodus to stay in the P4. And he made them very attractive and competitive again this year. They lost to BYU and Texas Tech. They had the misfortune of playing those 2 programs who were the class of the Big 12 this year. By the way, Texas Tech and BYU have much more resources available to them than Utah does. So I think this is a home run hire. I think Scott Bell came out with a tweet, and I'm sure all of you have seen it, from Kyle Whittingham, about Kyle Whittingham, that said, Kyle Whittingham follows 5 women on Instagram. All are fully clothed, and the majority of them are related to him. He has 0 posts in the last 11 plus years, hiring grade A+. Obviously having fun with the fact that, like, Kyle Whittingham, the person and the head football coach, is probably as opposite from Sherrone Moore as possible. So if your goal was just to wipe the slate clean and stabilize the program, you did the job. Kyle Whittingham's the adult in the room. Kyle Whittingham builds a culture, a togetherness, and a program. He doesn't build a team, he builds a program. And that's what Utah is. Utah is in the position it is right now because of Kyle Whittingham. So I've seen people talk about, like, well, how could you go hire a bridge coach? Look, you could hire a bridge coach. It's fine. I think 10, 15 years ago, if you hired a coach and you expected them only to be there for 3 to 5 years, you'd be a little disappointed. But the longest tenured coach in America right now is Kirby Smart. I think he's been at Georgia for about 10 years now. He's not going to leave Georgia for another college program. Maybe he'll leave for the NFL at some point. But he's at his alma mater. If you are truly expecting your coach to be at your program for longer than 5-6 years, then maybe your standards for winning are not as high as you think they are, or you are living in the past. It doesn't matter if it's a bridge coach. It doesn't matter if he was planning on retiring this year. What he did at Utah was so impressive. The way he was able to build, the way he was able to modernize his offense this year, and he did that not having the most resources in his conference, or not even being near the top of his conference in NIL funding, in being able to retain his players, in any of the top metrics that is required to win in college football today. So now he goes to Michigan, and he has the big brand behind him. He has that logo behind him. He has all the NIL resources behind him. For better or for worse, two things can be true. You can, one, hire a bridge coach, or you can call it, as you could call it, a bridge coach. You could. I don't think Kyle Whittingham's going to be there for 15 years. He's in his mid 60s. He's probably not going to be there for until his 80s. But let's say he's there until his early 70s. Two things can be true. One, you can hire a bridge coach, but two, he can be an upgrade over your past coach. Regardless of anything, if Kyle Whittingham was available on December 1st and the rumors of him retiring weren't out there, do you realize how many other programs would have reached out to him? Do you realize how many other people would have lined up an offer ready for Kyle Whittingham because of how respected and that he is and how ready to win he is if he just has resources? He's been doing everything he's done so far with far fewer resources. A lot of times taking the field against teams who have a talent advantage over him, and he beats them. And I'm so excited to watch the Michigan-Ohio State rivalry take another level this year. Kyle Whittingham, for those who don't follow a lot of Utah football or Big 12 football or Pac-12 football in the past, he's a level 1, grade A shit talker. He hates his rivals. And that Michigan-Ohio State game, especially once Whittingham gets his feet settled, gets some of his players in, starts building his culture, maybe not year one, but when it's his team, truly his team, there's going to be some real high levels of animosity at Michigan for Ohio State and vice versa. It's going to feel like the Michigan-Ohio State rivalries of the past, not just what happened with the Sherrone Moore stuff. So I'm really excited for that. It's a massive upgrade. I don't think even if he was a bridge, it was a problem. I don't think even if it was a bridge for Michigan that it's a problem. I think what they need right now more than anything is to find a coach that will allow them to not only win and build a program, build a strong culture again, but also have a coach that if he chooses to retire, leave, or go into whatever he wants, go into TV in 3 to 5 years, that job is only attractive, but it's also a ready to win culture building and team for whenever he chooses to leave. So I think Michigan really knocked the ball out of the park, and it's just going to be a situation that Kyle Whittingham is going to really be able to succeed at Michigan, hopefully for a long term, but if not, at least for a short term. He's bringing in a lot of Utah staffers. He's bringing in Jason Beck, his offensive coordinator, who he was able to bring up from New Mexico last year because he needed to modernize his offensive system. This is a coach that, yes, he's in his 60s, but he's able to adapt. So I'm very excited to see how Michigan goes forward from here. I do want to talk a little bit about the Utah side of it. It was kind of gross. I'm not going to be the one to say that I didn't expect him to leave Utah. I think, I don't know, maybe it was mid-November when I said, Jace, just watch out. This might be Kyle Whittingham's last game as a college football coach, or at least as a Utah coach. I don't know. His comments at the end seemed like he was retiring. Last year, at the end of the year, he had to come out with a statement just announcing that he's coming back to Utah for another year and not retiring. So all signs pointed to him retiring. Morgan Scalley, who's now the new head coach, had been with Kyle Whittingham for years, and it just was a weird situation, man. I don't know if Scalley told Utah saying like, hey, make me the coach now or I'm going to leave, or if Kyle pulled the rug out from under them, having told them all year that, yeah, he's going to retire, and then had a change of heart last second and wanted to stay. But at that point, the plan was already in place for them to hire Morgan Scalley, and they basically had to get him, kick him out. I don't know. Maybe I'm an idealist. Maybe I'm a romantic. If my coach has been at my program since 2005, if my coach is the all-time winningest coach in my program's history, if my coach has won conference title games, if my coach has done more for my program than I could ever imagine, then I want to give him a good send-out, even if he wants to leave to go coach Michigan. I would want to make sure that the guy who's built the program up, is given as many opportunities as possible to stay. So I think it was gross how Utah handled this. If I understand a plan could have been in place for Morgan Scalley to be the coach and Whittingham pulled the rug out from under them. I just think it is nasty if the conversation in the Utah athletic department was, well, we're going to hire this first-time head football coach, even though I get it, he's been on the staff for years, but we're going to hire a first-time head football coach to replace our legendary coach. Our legendary coach wants to return for another year and wants to stay here, and we're going to say no. They said no to him. They forced him out. They forced him into retirement, or as Whittingham called it, they forced him into the transfer portal for the coaches. So Michigan got a gift by this. Utah screwed this up royally. I do think, though, maybe all feelings have been hurt at this point, but I do think just with what Kyle's done there, how much he means to that fan base, whenever it's all said and done for him as a coach, he's going to be remembered as the Utah head football coach. He's going to be remembered for what he did there. He's probably going to get a statue and a field named after him at Utah. But the fact that there was a coach in waiting situation that mattered more to the Utah athletic department than giving their legendary coach another year at least, bonkers. I would much rather tell Morgan Scalley, okay, we'll call your bluff. You don't want to be a DC for another year here, even though you've done this for a while. Go coach somewhere else, or see if you can get another job, and then we'll get back to you. Maybe if Kyle retires next year, we'll try to hire you. But we'll call your bluff right now. I think all of that overall was just nasty to watch from a Utah standpoint for a coach that matters so much to their program. But whatever. I'm not a Utah fan. I'm not a Michigan fan. I just think in general this was a great hire by Michigan that they probably didn't expect to be making. And it was just a monumental error by the Utah athletic department. Okay, so I saw an article last night about Colorado and Deion Sanders about what Colorado is facing heading into this offseason. In the first offseason, in the Deion era, they lost 57 players to the portal. I know they brought in a ton more. In the second offseason, they lost 41 players to the portal. They brought in a ton more. In the third offseason, they lost 33 players to the portal, and they brought in a ton more. So far, the transfer portal is not open yet, so all of these are expected entries. But so far, they have 23 players expecting to enter the portal. Heading into next year, as of right now, they have 0 returning scholarship defensive tackles. They have 1 returning scholarship linebacker. They've only brought in 14 players in the high school signing class. This is a 62nd ranked class, and it only has 1 defensive lineman. They're going to be relying on the transfer portal again heavily, and I get it. That's part of college football. I think Deion Sanders has a lot of detractors, has a lot of haters, and a lot of people who don't like the way he goes about his business as a head football coach. One thing I want to point out about that is I understand there are some things he does and says that people don't like. I get it. I don't like some of it either. I don't like Colorado retiring Shedeur and Travis's number. I don't like how they built some of that stuff. Their AD's retiring this year. They just hired a new AD. I wonder, almost cynically, if he retired because he doesn't want to be the guy to have to fire Deion Sanders. Not saying that would happen. But Deion was hired in the last year of the Pac-12, taking over for a 1-11 team. They went 4-8, and that was a massive step up from where Colorado was. I know 4-8 sounds bad, but that was a 400% increase technically. Then in their first year in the Big 12, I think they won 8 or 9 games. So it was like, oh, look at the trajectory of the program. But when you rely on the transfer portal this much, when you lose as good a player as Shedeur was, as good a player as Travis Hunter was, alongside the rest of the guys they lost, you can turn into a Florida State real quick. Florida State went 13-1, almost made the playoff, if not for a Jordan Travis injury, relying on the transfer portal. And then they relied on it again, but they missed on those players, and they have been bad for the last couple of seasons. When Deion came in, the hope and the promise was, all right, at that point, there's a couple coaches in college football that you would take a discount to go play for just because of their charm, just because of their ability to relate to you, just because of how cool they are. And you might think that's stupid, But at that point, it was Nick Saban because of his earned credibility. The Alabama discount was real. Players took much less NIL to go play for Nick Saban. And it was Deion. Deion at that point was like, okay, he could walk into any room and he would be the star of that room. You're telling me some 16, 17-year-old getting a call from Deion Sanders isn't automatically going to shoot them up on their list. And look, I'm not going to pretend like I know exactly the ramifications and the operations behind the scenes at Colorado. I don't know what his limits are, and I know that he was sick this past season and off season, which probably limited his staff's ability to prepare for the season or recruit at least a little bit. But if you remember, after Colorado went to Eugene and lost to the Ducks in year one of Deion, in the post-game press conference, Deion Sanders said a lot of the right things about why they lost the game, credit to Oregon, but he also said, I just want to put a warning out there. You better get me now because this isn't going to be what we are in a couple of years. Basically saying, like, I'm going to go recruit the best of the best, and I'm going to build this thing the right way. And because I'm going to take advantage of what makes me me, my ability to relate, my cool factor, my gravitas, whatever you want to call it, my charm, I'm going to put the best staff around me. I'm going to recruit as best as I can, and this team's going to be damn good in several years. And I don't know if it's an effort thing. I don't know if it's an operational limitation at Colorado. But 14 players in your high school class heading into year 4? That's just not good. That's not acceptable. I don't know where Colorado and Deion go from here. I don't know what Deion's future at Colorado looks like. For one, I might be in the minority here. I hope he's at Colorado for several more years to come, and he's building them up because I think he's good for college football. It also poses the question of, like, is a lot of what he said just like lip work, just trying to make you feel good about the program's future instead of actually putting plan into action and building up the program. So I'm interested to see what Colorado does going into this next year, going into this offseason, if they shift the way they continue recruiting. I mean, there's 3 transfer portal defensive tackles currently in the portal that are ranked in the top 50 of 24/7 Sports. Right now, Colorado doesn't have one scholarship defensive tackle returning for 2026. I mean, at that point, the hope might be bleak. Julian Lewis is expected to return at quarterback. They have some bright spots on the offensive side. But how many more years of this song and dance are we going to go until Colorado realizes, like, yeah, I think we can take advantage of more of our resources, more of our ability to be as unique as we can be, because there's a lot of programs out there who have head football coaches. There's one program that has Deion Sanders, so they can be pretty unique, and they just haven't been in several years. Like I said, I might be in the minority. I just hope that things continue to look up and pan out for them. They find a plan that they can put into action that sets them up for better success in the future, because it's been disappointing so far. And I know there's a lot of you out there who's probably just laughing at him and happy and, like, preying on his downfall and hating for it. And I understand that. Like I said at the beginning, I understand that some people don't like Deion for some of the things he says, some of the things he does, or the way Colorado's been operated since his arrival. I love entertainment. Some of the things he says I disagree with. Some of the things he says I don't like. But I think he's good for college football. So I just hope that Colorado can right the ship again and figure it out for next season, start taking a step up, and become more of a sustainable winning program, not just when they have a really good quarterback. Speaking of the transfer portal, there's a couple more people to check in on. DJ Lagway, Florida quarterback, we already know he entered the portal. It seemed like he had a conversation with John Summerall, the incoming head coach, and it didn't go right. It didn't go well, and he entered the portal right after that. It's just I hate saying fall from grace for a 19, 20-year-old kid who still has the opportunity to go to another P4 program and blossom. It's not a fall from grace, but it also is more of a fall from grace for all of the Florida fans who assured Jason and I last year that he's about to be a Heisman candidate. He's the best quarterback in the country. Watch out for DJ Lagway. And all we said was, I'll buy some of that, but this guy is injury prone. Florida is an unstable organization right now, and we don't know the future of Billy Napier or anyone on your staff. So we're going to take everything you say with a grain of salt. What ended up happening, obviously, Florida had a bad season. Billy Napier gets fired. They bring in John Summerall. DJ Lagway hops in the portal. So far, Jason and I have looked more right. And I expect him to go find another P4 job. Hopefully, it's somewhere that can develop him as a quarterback, and we'll see how they go from here. Chaz Coleman, defensive end at Penn State. I think he's if he's not the number one transfer portal player, he's the number two. He's just nasty. He's damn good, and I expect everyone who wants a game-wrecking defensive end to come calling Chaz Coleman. He's about to become a very rich man. Rocco Becht, we've covered a little bit, but he officially entered the portal from Iowa State. Without any credible knowledge, I would expect him to have Penn State pretty high up on his list because of Matt Campbell there, because of their offensive coordinator that was at Iowa State. He's at Penn State now. Contravian Wisner, running back at Texas. Now, Texas has lost a couple running backs in this cycle, and their run game was bad last year. They hired a new running backs coach. It just poses a question to me of, is this the player choosing not to be at Texas longer? Is this the coaches saying we can do better? Or is there something else that's an issue and they're just unhappy with how the protection from the offensive line or the scheme from Sark or something else at Texas that forced them into the portal? But he's going to be highly touted. Look, heading into this year, a lot of people saw him as one of the top players in college football, and I did too. It just didn't come to fruition this year. And then the last guy I wanted to check in on was Beau Pribula, the Mizzou quarterback. He transferred there from Penn State last offseason during the playoff run. If you remember, James Franklin just told him to go to Mizzou. Don't stick with the team during the playoffs because you enter the portal. We don't need to get into that. And now he's back in the portal, and it makes me wonder, I know I said Rocco back to Penn State. It makes me wonder, is Beau Pribula heading to Penn State to play for Matt Campbell? Is Beau Pribula heading to Virginia Tech to play for James Franklin there? Those are probably my top two options for him, but I don't know. The transfer portal opens this week on January 2nd, so we'll cover everything. We'll cover all the new entrants. It's pretty gross seeing all the playoff teams have transfer portal entrants already, but I also can't fault the kids for having to balance. Like, look at this. Austin Novosad, quarterback at Oregon. He's been there for 3 years now, backup quarterback. And I'm presuming he's going to go to Kentucky with Will Stein. When Will Stein was hired as offensive coordinator, he was Will Stein's guy, came out of Texas, out of high school in Texas. But Austin Novosad has been developing and building himself up, and he was expected to transfer. But heading into the January 2nd portal, if you think about it, man, this poor kid is balancing, okay, what can I do that's the best for my team right now to go win a national title? And does that line up with what's best for me in my future to make it probably to the NFL or grow more as a quarterback to get a starting spot? And he has to find a way to balance those two things. And so many kids out there on playoff teams have to do that because the college football calendar is still screwed up, but it's at least a little bit better now, but it's still screwed up. So a kid like Austin Novosad, a kid like a lot of the college football programs that are the playoff programs that are losing kids to the portal, they're making that hard decision. And I can't blame the player for it. I just think it's disgusting that we have a system right now that allows for that to happen. So hopefully we fix that in the future. We're going to get more into the transfer portal as the portal opens this week. One last check-in. We are now through most of December. Bowl games have been happening. And right now, the Big Ten is leading the way. They're 5-0 in their bowl games. The Pac-12 is 1-0. The Big 12's 2-0. The ACC's 5-3. The SEC's just 2-4. SEC and Sun Belt are both 2-4. The Mountain West is 2-5. But the Big 10, Big 12 undefeated so far in bowl games, and the SEC is, as of right now, the worst bowl performing conference in college football. This is definitely a stat that as bowl games come to finish and playoff games come to finish, we're gonna revisit because I think it's a year in year out conversation of which conferences are better. And obviously, we know the SEC's probably got the edge right now, but year in year out, the SEC has been underperforming in bowl games or in the playoffs over the last couple of years. So we'll keep tabs on that. Thank you so much for tuning into my solo show. It's been fun so far to be able to talk a little bit off topic of actual games that are happening. If you didn't watch the Pop-Tarts getting toasted at the Pop-Tart Bowl and Kalani Sitake trying to break off after they came out of the toaster, go watch that. Really funny. Kyle Whittingham got hired at Michigan. Great hire. A+. I love it. I hope transfer portal entrants throughout college football find their next home, and we aren't stuck with another situation with over 2,000 kids in the portal and only like 400 to 600 of them finding homes. I hope every one of them is getting good advice and is making the jump when they should instead of when they feel like they need to. And I hope Deion Sanders figures it out. All right, that's all from me. My name is Farbod Markazi. Make sure you are following us on Twitter at F4Discussion, on TikTok at Flag4Discussion. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts at Flag4Discussion spelled out, and on YouTube at Flag4Discussion spelled out. Jace will be back this week. From myself, Farbod Markazi. Thank you so much for tuning in. This has been Flagged for Discussion.